Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida Fair Tax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, January 17th, 2025. Federalist number 21, President Trump and the elimination of the income tax. President Trump has announced that his goal of eliminating taxes on tips, Social Security benefits, overtime compensation, and other types of income has received great support. It's apparent that more and more people are realizing that taxing income is hurting both retirees and people who are still working to support their families. President Trump has long stated that he wants the federal government to work for the American people, not for the politicians and unelected bureaucrats who've been running it for their own benefit for decades. The Federalist Papers were authored by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay to support the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. They were published between October of 1787 and April of 1788. Federalist Paper number 21 was written by Alexander Hamilton and published on December 12, 1787. Here's some excerpts from it that are still very relevant today. Imposts, excises, and in general all duties upon articles of consumption may be compared to a fluid which will, in time, find its level with the means of paying them. The amount to be contributed by each citizen will, in a degree, be at its own option and can be regulated by an attention to his resources. The rich may be extravagant, the poor can be frugal, and private oppression may always be avoided by a judicious selection of objects proper for such impositions. It's an advantage of taxes on articles of consumption that they contain in their own nature a security against excess. They prescribe their own limit which cannot be exceeded without defeating the end proposed, that is, an extension of the revenue. If duties are too high, they lessen the consumption, collection is eluded, and the product to the Treasury is not so great as when they are confined within proper and moderate bounds. This forms a complete barrier against any material oppression of the citizens by taxes of this class, and is itself a natural limitation of the power of imposing them. Impositions of this kind usually fall under the denomination of indirect taxes and must for a long time constitute the chief part of the revenue raised in this country. In conclusion, President Trump, you and your team have promised to wrest control of the U.S. government from the self-serving elites and their unelected bureaucrats and return it to serving the American people. Your reforms will lead to greater prosperity for our children and the nation, and it's an opportunity that may not come again in our lifetime. Now, one of your proposals that will likely engender the most resistance, even from some Republicans in Congress, is your proposal to eliminate the income tax. The income tax and the IRS are very important to the D.C. elites who use the income tax and the IRS to reward their friends and punish anyone who disagrees with them or threatens their power to dictate what's best for the people. They use them to raise funds for their political friends by selling favorable tax treatment, to incentivize behavior which they believe is best, even if it's something that most people would not otherwise do, to criminalize what they perceive as non-compliance with their incomprehensible laws and regulations, and finally, they use the income tax and the IRS to punish hard work, savings, and investment, and make more people financially dependent on government. Although Americans are demanding that the U.S. government be reformed and work for its citizens, they also know that regulatory reform may be reversed by a subsequent administration. However, once you free the American people from the income tax and the IRS, they no longer have to file tax returns. They can keep all the money they earn. They can determine how much they pay in federal taxes and when they pay those taxes by adjusting their spending habits, and federal bureaucrats will no longer dictate how much we pay in taxes. Now, there may be ways for a subsequent administration to sneak in obscure regulations affecting an industry, but once the income tax is gone, there is no way to hide its reimposition from the American people. Of course, the best course of action is not only to repeal the income tax and abolish the IRS, but repeal the 16th Amendment as well, so no future administration can ever shackle the American people with an income tax again. We must come together and ensure that real tax reform, the fair tax, is not subverted by the elites in D.C. This will take the diligent efforts of all of us. Now, we need your financial assistance and we need your grassroots assistance. Please email us at info@fairtax.org and we'll give you some options on how you can best help us. At a minimum, please call your congressional representative and ask if he or she supports the fair tax. If so, thank him or her for their support and suggest they become a co-sponsor of H.R. 25 if they're not one already. If not, ask why not. Now, if your representative claims to be unfamiliar with a fair tax, offer to have someone come to their office and explain it to them. The solution? Pass the fair tax. Now, why would D.C. pass the fair tax and give up an almost unlimited source of donations? Well, they won't, at least not voluntarily. The only way they will is if the rest of us demand it. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system in the IRS along with it? Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing or investing $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to fairtax.org to invest in AFFT and help us pass the fair tax. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org.